There is a deep bond between what it means to be a community college educator and what Artship is about.
As you can see from the artship.org website, Artship scholarly research feeds the contemporary cultural educational practice, and Artship's cultural educational practice offers context for inquiry-based expression, not just here in the Bay Area, but globally, including Istanbul, where director Slobodan Paich joins us today.
Now, what we do, and we have done it from the beginning in America, from '88, we do something called theater miniatures. So, maximum 15-minute story, a 10-minute dance, a song, which all came from the person to share. So they're kind of a loose anthologies. The art is there as a model of you cannot make art without perseverance. But I want to talk about this station. Stories of Our People was called, performed in Circuitry Station. And along the walls, we have this exhibition. So showed the genesis of them coming from Anatolia in the traditional costumes and then returning in the Western costumes. And we invited the culinary school to reconstruct the food which the people at that time brought with them on the train going to Western Europe. And then visual artists make their comment about stories of our people. Then friends knew a teacher in southern Turkey, children who have never seen a train. They were told the stories, and then they drew these images of how they imagined their still relatives in Germany and other places. And then we asked architectural students of Bilge University to imagine a museum about the emigration. So that would just give you a sense
that this is why it's perfect to have you on the Gen channel. And as you've just said, it's not just about making art, it's about making community.
The simplest thing was to begin to use shop windows as display for artists. So, and we exhibited 5,000 exhibits in 10 years. We also worked in a local park to reclaim it for the citizens. It was full of criminal activities.
What does something like this do for a neighborhood?
It brings a flair, it brings an identity, and it brings a communication. It's like a continuous street party. Slowly, there is some sense of village, of identity.
The poles are made from cast-off recycled materials, rolling pins, chair legs, lace doilies. As neighbors became intrigued by the totems, Slobodan started a free workshop. His idea has even won a national Regenerating America contest as a social invention.
And yet they are not precious museum sculpture. They are in the street. They are between the art and the folk art. It's like a new popular art.
Out of that, for us to think of a place where we can really educate the children and youth who was, marginalized in so many ways, and we begin to address the crisis of perseverance through professional training, culinary, and then we got the idea of the ship to train them for the maritime things with artists as the role models of perseverance. It went through a nightmare of bureaucracy, and finally Clinton signed it and it came free for Oakland. But no.
Preparing the way for generations, like a praise singer, griot, jailer, shaman trickster, and spinners of dreams and visions. Like mystic magic messages in bottles. Like a prayer passion. For Artship is our canvas. Freedom of imagination precedes freedom of speech. We will prepare the way. Our ship, Artship.
And it was great to have a ship, never mind just for 4 years, but as a symbol. And we are still doing it. We are still called Artship. And we are. So, yes, it was a ship, but it is more than a ship.
That's right.
It is vitality.
I wanted you to tell us a little bit more about your journey into the world of academics, into the world of the arts, into the world of education and Artship.
Well, thank you for inviting me. Like old stories and old histories start with families, not always functional, but my parents were passionate translators, and I could tell the difference between the footnotes and backnotes. I could tell the difference between Botticelli and Leonardo when I was 5. But my mother was not a great cook, but she gave me love through telling me about Tolstoy and all kinds of. So instead of having a good food, I had culture. But I was a restless child. They gave me a name Slobodan, which means one who is free. And then both my parents always complained, saying, "You are much too free spirits, calm down."
That sounds familiar, Slobodan. I've known you a number of years. That doesn't seem to have gone away.
Well, so far, at 75, I'm still hobbling on. And so when I was 7.5, I heard about an audition on the radio for children performance. When my mother came back from work, she wanted to translate literature, but she translated machinery for factories and tractor instructions and things like that. Exhausted, she comes and she tells me, "No way. You have no talent and I have no time." But I went to the audition myself. I won it out of many children. And my professional training in art started when I was 7.5.
Wow.
And the adults would always teach me. Our choir, I was singing in the choir in the Radio Belgrade, would also sing in the Opera Carmen. So other children go home, but my mother let me stay to the end of the performance. The stagehands hide me in the revolving staircases, and everybody was teaching me. So I carried those skills and those relationships with me. So I am what I told you before, I am a school teacher at heart because I know all these various crafts and skills. I give them to people. Sometimes they don't want it, sometimes they want it, sometimes they misunderstood it and create something much better than what I gave them. But that dynamic of curiosity and an existential need to, I grew up, my childhood finished at 7, I became a professional. And the passion was there. And so the work we do now, it's from the person to the person. It's not like choreography or the theater where the choreographer had an idea and then people have to act it out. It is what that person can do. And it's that kind of bringing out because one was given is really what I could say about myself. But it's not to make just art together, be together.
To
because
be together. Yeah.
Art is also a label. I just tell you quickly a story. Then to reclaim this, and we'll come to it, and it's part of it, to reclaim this park, the Arroyo Viejo Park, which had this amphitheater which was burned and had the criminal activity in it. We got the only way to do it, we got the performance with children in the theater. So the Mexican mothers who didn't speak English, and there was about 1,000 people from Bosnia who were accepted into America, and they were in this neighborhood in Oakland. The Bosnian mothers, and not speaking English, and the Mexican mothers not speaking English made a tremendous bond.
Wow.
They helped each other with food bartering, finding jobs, with babysitting, and holding their babies while all the children were performing. That is more important than any art one could ever do. But then children make beautiful art. And we recited, we told the stories. The performance was called Windfall of Memories. We relied on the memories, and it rejuvenated and brought the community together. So art as a means and not as an end, it's very important. Creativity as a byproduct of problem solving, not as some new age class in which you paint with fingers, but you want to solve the problem and the solution comes. You want to paint on a canvas, but you don't know how to paint on a canvas. You have that problem, that creates a painting. So you wanted to know about programs. Well, that was one of the programs. Each piece is like a little jewel which came from the person. It is nothing fashionable. It is not thinking, is it this, is it that, should I conceptualize it or not? There was one art critic who came to one of our performances because some niece of his was in it. And he came afterwards and said, have you ever heard of Brecht? I said, yes. And he said, he doesn't show. I said, well, that is the point. And he just went like, you peasants. So these miniatures, which are the whole pieces, the whole universe, parallel together, coexisting, people helping bring each other's chair, simple thing. Mm-hmm. So it's a very palpable collaborative.
It occurs to me, Slobodan, more powerfully maybe than it ever has, that this is why it's perfect to have you on the Gen channel, because the majority of my audience will be community college educators and community college students. And as you've just said, it's not just about making art, it's about making community, making resilience.
Exactly.
Making collaboration happen, and not necessarily in places where it's been encouraged or only in elite environments. In fact, quite the opposite. You are, in a sense, a virtual floating global community building kind of collage, if I can make the pun.
I was, once we lost the ship, suddenly people, probably they were asking me before, and we lost the ship because we cannot withstand the pressure from the real estate lobby. So it was illegally confiscated from us. But we cried, we let it go, and suddenly life opened for me. I was invited by my old students, colleagues from my gymnasium, which are now academics all over the world, suddenly to all these conferences. And then from the conferences themselves to more conferences. So it became exhausting to go every other month back to Europe or somewhere. So I was looking for a place where I could stay for a while and do the conferences. And Italy, we did a summer school in Italy when I taught in England. No, I tried Barcelona. No, I looked at it. And then one year there was 2 conferences, Hadir Kas and Sabancı University, at the end of October and at the beginning of October. So I had a month in Istanbul, and I realized it's Istanbul. So I was staying at this charming hotel with a great person, tiny, tiny hotel with gorgeous breakfast glass room looking at the Marmara Sea and the islands and all of that. And then a friend of mine found Halka Art Project, art residency in Istanbul. I applied and I said, I want to do tea and ink drawings, which I do every day. First, a little bit myself, then with some people, and then developed a kind of a telling, a small performance from it. And it confused them, so they looked on the web and saw a very complicated curriculum vitae exhibited at Venice Biennale, blah, 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 all of those external and unimportant things. And they asked me, what do you want to do? Although I clearly said, you know, tea and ink drawings, and at that moment, when their email came and said, what do you want to do? There was a tiny 3-minute video made by Global Oneness Project called Silent Crescendo about me drawing with tea at a samovar tea house where we used to meet. And I sent them that, and they said, oh, okay, you can come. And that intense, basically deep relationship with Halka Art Project in Istanbul started. The following year, we did a project about immigrants from Turkey in the 50s and 60s after Second World War, going small scale things, intimate performances. So without acoustic, just what you hear normal, how you would hear singers in the old times, but not sentimental, not old times. It's living. We have a Tolga who sings throat singing and was trained in Siberia. And he is a scholar of Altaic culture and language and so on and so forth. He sings beautifully in that voice, with that passion. It's very unique. We never hold auditions. I'm open, that's all. When somebody say something, and of course, if I see a talent, Olcay, who is now dancing with us, was sitting next to me in this cafe where I used to go every day. And now it's a little too far because I moved. And she was sitting next to me and she was just reading something and turning the pages, which is such a simple internal grace. I thought, this woman must be a dancer. And it was only in my peripheral vision. So I turned to her and we start talking. I asked her what she's reading. She was reading something about some dance theory. And then following year, I invited her if she will be interested to come. So all of these, whoever ever performed with us has never come through an audition, always through synchronicity, through a friend. They come to the performance, just what you said. There was a woman in a wheelchair who came to one of the early performances in Oakland. We didn't have elevator, they carried her up. And she said, I want to work with you. And we designed all kinds of sculptures, carried her on, and so on and so forth. And she had the polio as a baby, but she can use her arms, and her stage presence was extraordinary. And she became our principal dancer.
Wow.
You know, in the opera house, the politics of the opera house, the rivalry, the intrigue, the backstabbing was shocking to me. Same in the film industry, and so on and so forth. So we started an independent theater already in Belgrade, which had that sense that people should come because they want to be there. And with some synchronicity from them for them.
Well, and I'll add, as a former board member, not only you don't do auditions, because that's not the point. You never charge for quote unquote lessons or services, or, I mean, this is all, it's all generated from a community, but it is always in service of the community. It's not something, it's never something to generate a profit or even to break even. It is to make community, and community can't be bought. It can only be made. And that's a beautiful part of what Artship does as well. And I've seen Slobodan help so many otherwise ordinary people, actually quite extraordinary, but find their extraordinariness as poets, as painters, as dancers, as actors, as singers, as community members, of all ages, from all backgrounds, of all abilities. So that's what makes Artship. That's what makes Artship Artship. And of course, it's beautiful that it still goes on, from Belgrade to Berkeley to Istanbul and beyond. And Slobodan, I'm thinking maybe this is a good moment to ask you a little bit about what you've been doing in terms of conference work and scholarship this year as well, because that's a whole other dimension of what you do. So there is the community building and service to communities, but you also have a thriving academic career. So tell us a little bit about that, because of course I know well from reading so many of your papers that these two are not separate spheres at all. Sure. In fact, they are completely integral in a way that's really powerful. And if you can speak to that, I think that would be fascinating for a lot.
Well, I'll try, because lots of it is also non-verbal. But my commitment and research is about comparative cultures, but forgotten, derogated, stolen, appropriated, misunderstood cultures. So it's really about ancient wisdom holders who have been often illiterate women, old women, widows, old men, blind singers, who have carried the whole wisdom of Vedas or the whole wisdom of some African religions, and the whole Greek religion, which comes deeply from Egypt. And it was so, the Egypt is so cut as a primitive as opposed to Greeks, but everything the Greeks got is from Egypt. These kind of links need light to be put on. And because I'm old and, we have a tiny grant, and I am free, and I have always done teaching also to earn the living, but the ideas, the art, the working with people is never compromised. Or, one has to fit into the world, but not compromised to the point that we look for the grant, which we did, or we do something to impress someone. But to have a job so one can have intellectual freedom and to be able to bring the light onto the things which have been suppressed. There is a huge communication between Asia all the way up Danube to the Willendorf, where the Willendorf went, these are connected all the way through the Central Asia, through Turkic cultures. The Mongolian Moringhur has a horse's head. The Serbian and Balkan Gusle, which is the narrator's, singer's story, has a horse's head. And musicologists cannot explain why is the horse's head. Well, because the communication across the Black Sea of the Danube and Euphrates were very, very close and all the way there. These kind of links have to be voiced. And I don't have resources to prove them. I have just tiny little, but somebody has to tell it. And I started that in 1969 at the college level, introducing the history of art and ideas, not just history of art, ideas, because painters were not trained about music. Nobody knew about the medicine, and so on and so forth. So art by itself, it's part of a general feeling of the time. So the ideas. So from that, and showing that the ancient people are not primitive, they're sophisticated, deep, equal intelligent as us, and they can make something with a tiny little bit of stone ingeniously. So that has been my center of my academic work.